All right, welcome in. The floor is yours. All right, we're back. I think we're back. Ethan Skolnick here for Floor. I don't know what happened. I was put backstage. All right, Ethan Skolnick here for Floor is Yours on the 5 Reasons Sports Network, an extension of 5 on the Floor. I got Greg Sylvander. I got Ricky J Marc. We may or may not have Alex Toledo. Let's start right here. We're going to be taking, obviously, your comments. That's what we do here instead of doing a podcast tonight. We'll be back with a pod tomorrow night when the Miami Heat resume against the Orlando Magic. They'll be doing so without Bam Adebayo. Let's address that first, and then we'll kind of get to the news of the day, which Greg, you just played a role in reporting that, and then we'll get to some Hall of Fame conversation as well. Bam Adebayo, after an 8-day break, because he didn't play the last game before the break, is missing the first game coming back with knee tendonitis. I tried to do a little research on this myself. Nobody's really saying how bad this is. Do we get any sense? I mean, I understand wanting to give him some extended time, but when he first went out again, as is typically the case with the Heat, it was made out to be really not that big a deal.
Yeah, it's, to me, I would be cautious just because, like, for All-Star break to have passed and for him to now be missing a game, that to me tells me that it's something lingering. There was a moment in the end of that game in the second half, I think, where Bam appeared to have done something, and he was, walking gingerly, and then he kind of dusted himself off and kept playing. And I don't know exactly. I mean, I thought I heard it was arthritis, but I mean, that's kind of a pain tolerance thing. So I'm not 100% sure that that's exactly what's going on, but it's concerning when it's been this long and he's, still having to sit out.
And again, this is going to lead to kind of part 2 of this, guys, but they don't have a lot of bigs to begin with. Obviously the Myers-Leonard situation. If you want more of my thoughts on that, we're not going to do a lot of that here today. I was on Miami Sports Break here on the channel earlier today with David Eversole and Jakari Givens, and we got into a whole bunch of that stuff. So certainly you can check that out if you'd like. But obviously they don't have Myers-Leonard. They haven't had it since the start of the season. Mo Harkless has really been of no value. KZ Okpala, not a trusted option at the 4. I mean, essentially they're only big. I mean, other than Precious and Bam is Kelly Olynyk. That's it. That's what they've got. So I guess, and then we'll get to the player that they're looking at now. But if Bam's out for any extended period of time, how does this team even survive that? What does that look like compared to being without Jimmy, Ricky?
I think it looks a lot like the KO show. Basically, I've started to notice a trend this season. If Miami is missing Bam, it's unfortunate, but it doesn't kill you as much as missing Jimmy does. Given what Bam is used to doing and bringing to the table, yes, close to 20 points a game, close to 10 rebounds a game, a couple blocks, some assists here and there. That can be done by committee. What Jimmy brings is that guy that can bring you to the finish line at the end of a game, something that we've been waiting for Bam to do for a long time and hasn't done so consistently and doesn't look to be doing that anytime soon. So if that is the case, this will simply be a roster built around Jimmy in which we will funnel as much of Jimmy, as much usage into Jimmy as possible. We'll go from there, and Jimmy will have to continue to be a poor man's LeBron James until Bam gets back.
Take a look at the column on the website too. Marco Romo wrote a piece about sort of it being all Jimmy all the time and the problems of counting on him quite too much. All right, so let's get to part 2 of this. First, there was a report from Woj and then Shams, and of course, they didn't mention the Heat specifically. But basically, Greg Popovich announced even before the game tonight they're parting ways with LaMarcus Aldridge, who's been there for a number of years. I think it's now 6 or 7 years that he's been with them. His role was diminished somewhat this year. He's down to about the 23 to 24-minute mark. Previously, obviously, he'd been a 32-minute-plus player. The Spurs are playing well without him. In fact, and we do need to acknowledge this, their numbers are better this year without him on the floor, particularly defensively. And so this was considered to be a mutual decision. We obviously know that the Heat have had interest in LaMarcus in the past. They made a run at him when they really had nothing to offer him. There was that sort of surprise meeting between Riley and Aldridge. I actually spoke to Aldridge a year after that meeting because I was out in Las Vegas at the USA basketball camp. I asked him if he would ever circle back with Pat, and he just smiled. So clearly that went well. There was a lot of mutual respect. Greg, you've since reported now that the Heat do have interest. They're they're sort of negotiating this thing to see if they can make it work. And, the podcast we did the other day, I said the Heat are looking to add a closing option. LaMarcus Aldridge has been a closing option over the course of his career, but that the Heat are not willing to give up sort of a guy who could be their third best player for somebody who might be their seventh best player, which might be what LaMarcus is at this stage. So 2 questions. Do you trade for him? How much would it cost to get him? Or do you just wait for a buyout situation and that's the only way that you let this play out?
Yeah, so I thought the news from Pop today was particularly interesting coming from him. And then Tim McMahon and Woj kind of, cleaned up shop when it came to that they're working on a bunch of trades. So then that's where I went and dug into two different people that I speak to that are close to the team, and both immediately said that that LaMarcus is someone that they've pursued in the past and they're pursuing now because the cost. A lot of these guys, it's been cost prohibitive to try to go after them. This is not that situation. San Antonio wants to do right by LaMarcus Aldridge. So I think it's just something to watch. They have a lot of expirings to match up contracts. But Portland is another team I would keep an eye on with LaMarcus Aldridge as well.
Yeah, he left on good terms with Portland. That's the first part of this. And there still is, the Dame thing, he and the two of them, it's a little bit of a power struggle there at the end. But I do think that that would be a fit. And they need a big. They've had trouble sort of keeping their bigs healthy. Typically, Zach Collins is out again. But let's get to this, Ricky. I mean, LaMarcus has been, over the course of his career, one of the better, sort of stretch bigs in the game. A mid-range player, had a great mid-range game. There were always a lot of comparisons between him and Bosh, not necessarily defensively, but in terms of sort of that offensive ability to step out and all that. He's still a pretty decent shooter. I mean, shooting numbers are not terrible this year. He's expanded his range out to the 3 at about 3.5 attempts. But, I mean, this is not the same. I just want Heat fans to understand. I think he could potentially be an upgrade over Olynyk, but I don't think that this is somebody who is what he used to be.
No, by no means. But here's the thing. This Heat team has a way of maximizing what little they have. I mean, you're talking about a Heat franchise that has made relatively passable NBA players out of G League alums. So if you have a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge and you bring him in, then I think we will find a way to make him very productive compared to elsewhere, because he might not be asked not the same thing might not be requested or demanded of him here in Miami compared to elsewhere. So I think it'd be a great get. I mean, considering this season in terms of the bigs, the Heat have gotten next to nothing outside of Bam and KO every 5 games. So if you were to bring him in and maybe even convince the Spurs to give up Rudy Gay in a small trade, then I think it helps this team out, generally speaking.
Yeah, Alex is here. We'll bring you in a second, but I want to cycle back to Greg on this. The Rudy Gay part of this is interesting. Is there a way to expand this deal in some way? And I guess the other question, too, is, I mean, again, we've sort of moved in day 2 to talking about the Myers situation as a contractual situation again, right? I mean, because everybody sort of has had their say over the past 24 hours about that circumstance. I mean, is he? I mean, could you even include his contract now at this point, and San Antonio just cuts him loose afterwards? Is that an option?
I think you can. I think that's something that they would definitely explore. San Antonio would obviously just cut him immediately, but it would be a situation, and I'm truthfully speculating here, but they could say, like, waive your no trade clause, and like, that's the least you can do in this situation to facilitate some sort of trade, because it wouldn't take much beyond Myers, Mo Harkless. I mean, you basically, per Bobby Marks, he tweeted it out just a bit ago, you got to get to 19 million to acquire LaMarcus Aldridge. So if you're talking Myers, Leonard, Mo Harkless, I mean, a question I'll ask everybody here: if you had to give up Myers, Mo, and Avery Bradley, so essentially this last offseason, to get LaMarcus Aldridge, do you do that?
Yes.
In a heartbeat.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't
you
trust,
you, you give up.
You go ahead, Ricky.
Yeah, you give up a failed offseason free agency wise for a guy who can still produce something. I'll take 5 points a game over what these three have amounted to this season. That's just being honest.
Yeah, and again, as we talk about, they have a backcourt tilt right now, right? And when Avery comes back, if your roster is as it is now, I don't even know where all the minutes are going to come from. I mean, if none is still going to be a major part of your rotation, I mean, let alone a starter, then I don't know necessarily that Avery – I mean, I know they've talked about Avery being a potential closer and playing minutes, but it's a lot of minutes in the backcourt. We know that there are minutes available in the front court. So, to me, you sort of rebalance your roster by doing that, by replacing a guy in Harkless who is not going to contribute for you.
And Myers.
Also, if you could – yeah, look, and if you can move the Leonard contract, here's the other thing, and we'll bring in Alex on this one. As of right now, this minute, not historically, is LaMarcus Aldridge an upgrade for this team over Kelly Olynyk?
Yeah, I think he's an upgrade. Like, I think what he brings is something that the Heat are kind of, like, the offense has been a huge issue this year, man. And just adding somebody else who can bring their own shot. I understand he's not in his prime anymore. You're not going to feed him over and over and over again like they used to. But he's somebody who can absolutely help with the offensive side of things, which is where they're really struggling. I know we weren't expecting that. We're kind of expecting this to keep going back in the right direction with them offensively because of the weapons they still have. But even when it comes to playoff time, like, this is another guy who you can throw to as a release valve a lot of times for their regular sets, and then in other times when things bog down at the end of the shot clock to kind of create his own shot or, get to his spot and go from there. And it's a pretty good shot. You still take it. So I'm not against doing that at all. The one thing I'm just skeptical about is, why is San Antonio doing this? Why is San Antonio taking on Myers, of all people, right now, along with Kelly, Mo Harkless, Avery Bradley? Like, I just don't think that's a good return for them at all. I understand.
Greg, go to that. What's the asset? What is? I mean, what is?
It's Kendrick Nunn.
So there's a couple things here. One, it remains to be seen if San Antonio, like, just how nice they're going to play with LaMarcus Aldridge in this scenario, and what teams have kind of the cleanest trades for them to get him to a place that he'd want to be, essentially. That's how I have understood it so far. So I just don't think it's going to cost Kelly Olynyk, honestly. And I don't think that – I'm surprised you actually said that LaMarcus is a clear upgrade over KO. I think that that's debatable, and it would be more about – It would be more about supplementing the front court with LaMarcus in addition to Kelly Olynyk than replacing Olynyk. At least that's how I've kind of conceptualized this move, is that it's not an either thing. It would be in addition to.
Well, I just don't see with a move that makes sense for the Spurs here. Like, it just
you could be right. I mean, they may go to Portland. There could be a lot of teams. I mean, Brooklyn. Everybody goes to Brooklyn now, right? So I know that there's several teams in the mix here, and if it gets to a buyout scenario, I think it probably even is less likely that LaMarcus would end up in Miami. Really? So that could also incentivize the Heat.
I mean, if it's a buyout situation, to me, the teams that jump out, Boston jumps out to me.
Yeah.
I think having another high, one of the comments that came in here, and I agree with, the biggest thing LaMarcus would add is basketball IQ, and particularly in those late moments. And you see,
Olynyk has plenty of IQ.
Well, but look, they see how they value what Iguodala provides down the stretch of games and what they value in the Shane. The thing about LaMarcus was he was always a good big game player. I mean, Ricky, am I wrong about? I mean, you look at he had a stretch over 2 years where he had some pretty good playoff numbers, where his numbers elevated in the postseason. He's not typically a guy who has shrunk in those moments. Like, I feel like he's playable. He's been playable in those situations, even when he hasn't been at the highest elite level.
So you're talking about LaMarcus Aldridge.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the moment you say that, I'm reminded of this back-to-back 40-point explosion he had against the Rockets a couple of seasons ago. I believe it was the same series that Damian Lillard finished off with that three with like 0.5 seconds left. He has the ability to do that sort of thing, and especially considering the direction in which this league is going, it's something that, honestly, it just kind of bums me out, considering how quickly Chris Bosh was taken from the league, because LaMarcus Aldridge could realistically play, given his skill set and what he can do in terms of shooting as a guy 6'11" and above. He could play until he's 40. I mean, Channing Frye had 5 years added to his career because of his ability to shoot threes that he picked up later in his career. So for a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge, absolutely, especially when you're not looking to him to average 20 points and 10 rebounds. You've got Bam for that, you know? So I think it would work out very well. And what we've seen in past in history really is that if you have a moderately talented team that is supremely intelligent out there on the floor, you can see them make it all the way to the NBA Finals. I mean, look at the 1996 Bulls. As great as Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman were, you couldn't really play with them on 2K. You give the ball to Michael every time, he'd shoot, he'd score every time. But if you look at that roster, it's not very special. Judd Buechler wouldn't start today, even if he is a shooter, right?
I didn't think you'd get a Judd
they
Buechler
were smart
today.
Oh no, yeah, that was a guarantee. But the thing is, they were smart. That's the thing. I mean, the 2013 Heat, they had LeBron, Bosh, and all that stuff, but they were arguably the smartest team in the league next to the Spurs. That matters. It matters. And having LaMarcus Aldridge here, especially for those big games, I saw a comment that said it would be, I think it was Adam that said it would be the Iggy Crowder deal all over again. If that is the kind of deal you can get when you have Iggy here already, I think we can start talking about a potential dark horse for the finals again if that deal goes through.
Do you trade Iggy though, Alex? I mean, as part of the trade here? I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, again, we talk about matching contracts.
Yeah, that's the tough part. So I haven't actually gone through trade scenarios yet of the ways that you can do it to try to keep certain guys. Like I would like to keep Kelly and Andre. Sure, I think they're pretty good players generally and could, help this team still. But no, I don't want to trade Andre, especially. I mean, look, if you're getting Rudy Gay, I would feel better about it because he fills that role. But I don't think you want to give up. Like you want to supplement, like you guys said. I think, and we've had this conversation before. If I had to choose one, it would be Andre. But I wanted to pose a harder question with you again for you guys because, again, I'm still skeptical that they're gonna, really be into a deal unless I don't know. Maybe I'm dumb and it comes out and it's just like it just didn't take that much to get these two guys. If you're talking about Aldridge and Rudy Gay, but if you're trying to entice the Spurs, like, wouldn't you have to give up one of Kendrick Nunn or Precious? And would you be willing to do that?
Well, the other guy,
especially if you can subtract one of these other guys that you want to keep.
Well,
I don't know if that's possible.
And that's my question. Like, what is the guy that they would want? I'm having.
They got a lot of guards, a lot of young guards. So maybe Precious, because the only big that they've got in their core outside of LaMarcus is Jakob Poeltl, who's been pretty good. But still, like, there's no reason you can add. You can't add
I don't like it.
Core.
I don't like it.
I think in a situation like that, I think you're better off hoping for a buyout because here's
Correct.
the thing. I think LaMarcus Aldridge he would be a really good addition to this Heat team, but anything outside of some of the guys that Miami already is willing to trade, I think you cut bait. You don't go there because the thing is
that's been the problem all this time is that we keep talking about guys Miami can get, but it's either guys you wouldn't want to trade or guys no one would want. I mean, there's like no middle ground for this team right now, and that's problematic. I mean, if KZ Okpala had shown something this season, I think this is a different conversation. I think if Okpala had shown something, then he could have been the piece that could have been the sweetener in some of these
still can be.
What's that?
He still can be.
That's true.
Just not
he's a year.
Too.
Yeah, I think he's a year away from being a sweetener. Honestly.
Yeah. Well, that's not very nice. Okay, stop it, Matty. All right, let's get.
I can think of somebody who's trash, and it's not KZ. But let's continue.
I mean, look, he
hasn't had an
opportunity. So
Too short of a leash.
So, all right, let's refocus here a little bit. I wanted to touch on since we do have Ricky on here, and we want to get into this. We'll start with Bosh, but I want to go back to Hardaway. We were going to do some Bosh Hardaway moments. They're both finalists for the Hall of Fame this time. Again, Bosh is going to get in. Tim may come down to a situation of, again, whether or not people have gotten over what he said 13, 14 years ago at this stage. But let's get to give me your favorite Chris Bosh moment, Alex. It could be anything.
Oh man, you're really putting me on the spot right now. Jesus Christ. I mean, look, it's tough to not say, that block that he had in game 6 just because it was It's not as important as the Ray Allen jumper, but my God, was that an important block? Because Danny Green could have absolutely hit that shot. It's just because that's different though. Like I feel like we got to categorize it differently because like a finals moment just weighs so much more. But if you're talking about regular season, and Chris Bosh had a lot of them, by the way, like that's actually a really, really tough question. Like I probably have to go between one of the 2-game winners he hit when he was playing without LeBron, and I want to say without Dwayne too, whether it was Portland, San Antonio, Atlanta. Like it's just picking from one of them 3. And I think if I had to pick one, I would say the Portland one. That's the one that always comes to mind. But that was with Dwayne. I remember he hit that behind the back pass. But Chris Bosh is awesome, man. I miss him so much, and he should be a part of this. He should have been a part of this whole run.
No, he absolutely should have been a part. Actually, I was at all 3 of those games, so I remember all of them well. For different reasons. I actually favor the Atlanta one. And the reason I favor the Atlanta one is if that game went to double overtime, I think it was. And they were playing with Terrell Harris down the stretch of that game. And
I was so convinced Terrell Harris is going to be a good player. I'm like, wow,
15. I think he had everything.
Terrell had,
like 15 rebounds.
Afterwards, and I said, you had 13 rebounds tonight. He says, why are you looking at me like that's a big deal? I'll do that again. I don't think he had 13 rebounds over the rest of the course of his career. But basically, that was the Atlanta game. So many moments with Bosh. One of the things I will always remember with Bosh is cable gates. That's one of my favorite. All the gates that they went through that year. The stupidest one was when Chris merely said at a shoot around before they played Toronto that he couldn't get the good cable in Toronto, that this is one of the better things. It literally was a front page story on the Toronto Sun that day. Like Chris could not catch a break that entire season, everything he said. And then, of course, goes back to Toronto, and after they win, he basically did the wrestling move and went around and called on them to boo him some more after the game. So, I mean, Chris is one of my favorites. I'll let one of the 2 guys jump in on a Chris, and then let's do a Timmy here.
So I think for me, in terms of Chris Bosh, it would have to be the game winner against San Antonio just after the streak was snapped. Because if Miami had won that game and they had beaten the Bulls in a couple of those games before, that win would have been win number 34 in a row. And it would have been just, I mean, of course, historic and all that other stuff. But I think I would say that is something. I mean, he's hit so many of those, right? So that's one. You took my Atlanta one where I think he had 37 and he was the only one on that team. And it's funny because Charles Barkley was there that night. He was doing the color commentary. And I would imagine that's probably one of the only games in the last 15 years that the TNT guys have actually watched in terms of the Heat. So I guess that was actually kind of cool too.
You got a Bosh, Greg?
Oh, of course. One is do you remember that the crazy 2-hand slam dunk on Christmas in LA? That was a huge play. I always remember. And he hit like a really clutch shot against Boston in the corner.
The tip in. Oh, okay.
In the playoffs. Am I crazy? Wasn't that in Game 7?
I think that was when he had just come back from the rib situation, right? Where he dunked it against Indiana, went down, and then came back in the that one.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So
Chris Bosh.
All right, let's switch to Timmy. You got one for Timmy, Greg?
Oh, of course, because I was in the building. It was Game 7 against the Knicks. He had 18 in the third quarter. I'll never forget it. It was the craziest that the Miami Arena had ever been to date at that moment.
Uh-oh. Did Greg? Okay, I think it might have been Greg. Greg, I think we're losing you.
He just dropped out thinking it's him.
Wow.
Ethan thought they were talking about him. That's hilarious.
That's funny. Well, okay, here's what I'll say.
Okay, go ahead.
No, maybe not. Here's what I'll say about Timmy. There was and I think I might have mentioned this on the radio when he was on Onside. It was the 2000 regular season, and it was another typical close game between the Knicks and the Heat. And Timmy had the ball on the right side with like a few seconds left. He curls around to the left side. He gets caught up by, I think, Charlie Ward, who was checking him heavy at that time, because that was back when you could still do that. And he just launches a three from his hip. It rattles in. He's running around with his hands up like this. And I believe that win had clinched the Atlantic Division for Miami that season and gave them home court advantage against the Knicks, which, true to form, they would lose anyways in Game 7 that year, because that's what the Knicks were all about back then.
My Alex, you're a little younger when all this stuff was going on. So
yeah, you want to hear my favorite Tim Hardaway memory?
Go with it.
I believe he was traded to the Heat on the day I was born.
Is that right?
I think that might be right. I'm gonna
check it. What's the date again?
2/22/96.
That is the date.
There you go. Crazy. You're welcome.
That is the date. I remember that well because I.
Damn, I'm really sad that Leif missed that nugget. Leif, did you hear that?
Back to Greg. So hey, Greg, we got a trivia question for you. Do you know who was born on the day that Tim Hardaway was traded to the Heat?
Alex, probably.
Yeah,
it's perfect. February.
Wow.
Yeah.
February 22nd,
1996.
I remember that day.
I remember when Tim first got here. Remember he'd been beaten out by BJ Armstrong in Golden State, and I remember his first press conference with the Heat, and he wouldn't say his name. Like I don't think it was anything against BJ. I've talked to BJ but it was like he could not bear the fact that he had been actually beaten out by BJ Armstrong as a starter. With Golden State, and then he comes here and he makes all-star teams. Tim's one of the great reclamation stories of Heat history that doesn't get talked about. Like everybody just talks about him as an all-star. Everybody thought he was cooked when he left Golden State. People thought he was done. He was he was an explosive offensive player, great on the break, crossover, and all that. And he changed his game probably as much as any great player has ever had to change their game to become basically a half-court standstill knuckleball jumper. Guy who played, and the other thing,
in the post,
best defensive team in the league during that period of time, and he was not an elite defender, but somehow Riley hid him well enough with Zoe behind, obviously helped that he ended up being a big factor there. All right, before we go here, just a couple of minutes left. I'll put this to you guys. Obviously, we don't know if we got Bam playing tomorrow. We know we don't have him playing tomorrow. We don't know when he's coming back. We've talked about them being under 80 minutes with Bam, Dragic, and Butler together. 36 games left, though. I polled this today. Can they win 24 or more in the last 36? Because if they do that, they're going to be a 4 seed. That would be winning 2 out of 3 games, which is kind of what we thought they might do this year. But they're 18-18. Do you see any scenario where they can win 24 games here in the last 36?
Yeah, I think so. I think so for sure. Because the interesting thing I've noticed is that some of the teams now are starting to deal with injury and COVID-related problems that they luckily were able to miss out on in the first half of the season. Miami's starting to get their guys back, and I think I mentioned this during one of the earlier streams, I think before the All-Star break. Once everyone starts to get back, once Jimmy starts to get back, once Bam remembers how good he is, this team will start to look more and more like the team that always had a puncher's chance against the best teams in the NBA. Now, of course, I'm still of the position that I think this team is still one or more trades away. But even so, if they're able to stay intact, they'll have a puncher's chance at best. I don't see them getting to the finals as currently constructed, but it's a legitimate possibility if things go their way as they did last season.
Alex, you think they can get 24 here? That would get them to 42 and 30 for this season, which again would be under what I think their over/under was 43 wins. So it'd be under what that was. But do you think they could get to that?
I think they could do it, and like Ricky said, puncher's chance seems fair. Like I can't sit here and say that I don't think it could happen. They just haven't played like the team consistently enough for me to believe that that's going to happen, or even somewhat likely. I'm a little bit more skeptical, but I still think like they have a really easy schedule left, right? Things have been going up in the right direction across all the statistical categories. You see it on the court. Jimmy looks great. We're still expecting to see a little bit more out of Bam when he comes back, but the team looks good. Like they've been looking a lot better, than they did in the past month or two. And honestly, like I wouldn't be surprised if they get about 20, 21 wins instead of 24. And, this team feels like a solid 5 seed. Maybe if they make a trade, that also helps. But I agree that as currently constructed, I don't think they're going back to where they were last year. And I think at this point we can expect a trade. And I'm going to say, 21 wins.
All right,
What's their winning percentage with Jimmy so far this year? Anybody know?
It's like slightly above mediocre.
No. I think they were 13-8, right? Does that sound right? I think it's 13-8, something along those lines with him.
It's not that great, but it's winnable. I mean, they have a chance.
So that's what? That's a 60.
Yeah, I mean that would essentially project out to about 22 and 10 and about 22 and 14 over the rest of the season, basically.
There we go.
Okay, that sounds about right. I mean, if they make a trade, but again, the X factor here is how many games are they going to miss Bam? Because you look at this game coming back from the break, like the Orlando game should be a win. I know it's Orlando. I get it that they struggle against them, but particularly on the road. But like that should be a win with how beat up Orlando is right now, and now with Bam out, you don't know that it's a win. So they can't. They've dropped so many games. I mean, I can't even remember all of them at this point. Games they've dropped that they should have won this season. That it's just hard to project it. I think they probably finished 39-33, which essentially is 21 wins the rest of the season. 21 and 15. Finish 6 games over 500, probably secure the 5 seed, which is what they were last year. And if they're playing well, Jimmy's healthy, people will project him as a dark horse. So I think that's probably it. All right, we'll be back tomorrow night. 4-5, regular 5 on the floor.
Over under 26.
What's that?
Over under 26 for how many points Terrence Ross drops on us tomorrow.
Oh my God, 35 in the first half. Random scrub Heat killers. There's more of them on Orlando than everyone else. So maybe Vucevic is going to be auditioning for the Heat. We'll see.
They got the all Heat killer team.
It's so true. Not really totally available.
I forgot it was much. Orlando. Damn it.
We always take the money's there for Royal. Roy's not even on this program. What the hell? Royal gets more money than we do. He's got better internet than I do. All right, for Ricky, Alex, me, Greg, 3 of us will be back tomorrow night. You can catch Ricky on the pregame show. Subscribe to the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. And I forgot to mention, but it is up there on the top right. Beer. Biscuit Brewing.
Hey, I've been Ubering a lot in Fort Lauderdale. I might have to come through.
What's that?
I've been Ubering a lot in downtown Fort Lauderdale. I might have to swing through.
Man. Just take it. Trust me. I don't. Yeah.
You up late? I'll swing through. We'll
swing through. I'll drop it off to you downstairs. All right. Everybody have a good night.
Okay.